In the vibrant heart of San Francisco, where the fog rolled in like a soft blanket over the colorful streets, I found myself standing at the edge of a life I didn't want. My name is Lila Hart, and I was an artist, a dreamer who splashed colors on canvas to escape the grayness of reality. But reality had a way of creeping in, especially when it came to my family. They were traditional, with expectations as rigid as the frames that held my paintings. My parents wanted me to settle down, to find a suitable partner, preferably someone who fit their mold of perfection. The pressure was suffocating. It was at an art gallery opening that I met Jasmine Rivers. She was everything I wasn't: pragmatic, composed, and fiercely intelligent. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that accentuated her sharp features, she moved through the crowd with an air of confidence that turned heads. I was drawn to her like a moth to a flame, intrigued by the way she seemed to command attention without even trying. As I watched her engage with other guests, I felt a mix of admiration and envy. Here was a woman who knew what she wanted and how to get it. Our paths crossed when I spilled red paint all over her pristine white blouse while attempting to demonstrate my latest piece, a chaotic explosion of color that mirrored my own life. Instead of getting angry, Jasmine laughed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Looks like you've made quite the impression," she said, wiping at the paint with a napkin. "Sorry about that. It's just my artistic flair," I replied, grinning sheepishly. We struck up a conversation that flowed effortlessly. Jasmine's wit matched my spontaneity, and before long, we were sharing stories about our lives, her career as a lawyer and my struggles as an artist trying to be taken seriously in a world that often dismissed creativity as frivolous. As the night wore on and the gallery buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, I impulsively suggested something outrageous: what if we faked a marriage? You know, just to escape our families. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. You mean like an arrangement? That's unconventional. Think about it, I urged. I could use some freedom from my family's expectations, and you could benefit from having someone by your side at those stuffy legal events. She considered it for a moment, her expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. And what's in it for you? A chance to live life on my own terms, I said earnestly. And maybe some fun along the way. To my surprise, Jasmine smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. All right then, let's do it. We shook hands as if sealing a business deal, but there was an unspoken understanding that this would be anything but ordinary. Little did we know how quickly our fake marriage would blur into something far more complicated. In the days that followed, we crafted our backstory meticulously. We created details about how we met at an art show, which was almost true, our shared love for weekend hikes in Marin County, and how we had decided to marry after realizing we were perfect for each other, at least on paper. The first time we introduced ourselves as a married couple was at dinner with my family. My heart raced as we walked into the restaurant together. Jasmine looked stunning in a simple black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her confidence radiated like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Lila, there you are," my mother exclaimed as she spotted us. Her eyes widened when she noticed Jasmine beside me. "And who is this lovely lady?" "This is Jasmine," I said with a smile that felt both foreign and exhilarating. "My wife." The look on my mother's face was priceless, shock mixed with disbelief followed by cautious acceptance. As dinner progressed, Jasmine played her part flawlessly, charming my family with her intelligence and humor while I felt myself relax into this new role. But as the weeks turned into months, living together began to complicate things in ways I hadn't anticipated. The lines between our fabricated relationship and reality started to blur as we navigated daily life together, Jasmine's meticulous routines clashing with my chaotic artistic tendencies. One evening after work, I returned home to find Jasmine sitting at the dining table surrounded by legal documents. She looked up as I entered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Hey, how was your day?" I asked cheerfully. "Busy," she replied tersely before returning to her papers. I watched her for a moment before deciding to lighten the mood. "You know what would make this better? A spontaneous dance party." Jasmine looked up again, this time with an amused expression. "A dance party? In here? With all this paperwork? Why not?" I grinned and started playing music from my phone, twirling around the room like nobody was watching. To my surprise, Jasmine chuckled softly and eventually joined me in an awkward but joyful dance around our small apartment. In those moments of laughter and silliness, something shifted between us, a connection deeper than either of us had planned for. But reality loomed over us like San Francisco fog threatening to roll in at any moment. The more time we spent together pretending to be married, the more real it felt, and the more complicated our emotions became. As I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this fake marriage was becoming something much more profound than either of us had intended. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of our shared apartment, casting a warm glow over the living room. I stirred awake to the sound of Jasmine's soft footsteps in the kitchen. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, pulling me from the depths of sleep. I smiled to myself. It was a small, comforting ritual that had become part of our daily routine. I stretched and rolled out of bed, still wrapped in the cozy embrace of my blanket. As I made my way to the kitchen, I found Jasmine standing by the counter, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, focused on pouring 2 mugs of coffee. She wore her usual crisp white shirt and tailored trousers, looking every bit the professional even in our domestic setting. "Good morning, Mrs. Rivers," I teased, trying to inject some lightness into the atmosphere. She turned to me with an amused smirk. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart. How did you sleep?" "Like a rock," I replied, grabbing a mug and taking a sip. The rich flavor warmed me from the inside out. "What's on our agenda today?" Jasmine glanced at her watch, her expression shifting to one of mild concern. "We have brunch with your parents at noon. Remember, they want to discuss our future plans." I felt a pang of anxiety at the thought. My parents were eager to hear about our life together, our fake life, and I was determined to keep up the facade. "Right, I'll make sure we're ready on time." As we prepared for brunch, I found myself caught between excitement and dread. The idea of spending time with my family while pretending that Jasmine and I were happily married felt like walking a tightrope without a safety net. We dressed carefully. I opted for a flowy sundress that reflected my artistic spirit, while Jasmine chose a tailored blazer that exuded professionalism. When we arrived at the restaurant, my parents were already seated at a corner table adorned with fresh flowers and sunlight streaming through large windows. My mother's face lit up when she saw us approach. "There you are," she exclaimed, rising to give me a hug before turning her attention to Jasmine. "And you must be Jasmine. It's so lovely to finally meet you." "Thank you, Mrs. Hart," Jasmine replied smoothly, shaking my mother's hand with confidence. As we settled into our seats, my father wasted no time diving into questions about our life together. "So, how did you two meet again?" he asked, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. I exchanged a quick glance with Jasmine before responding. "At an art gallery opening. We hit it off right away." "Isn't that sweet?" my mother chimed in, her voice dripping with enthusiasm. "And what are your plans now that you're married?" Jasmine took the lead effortlessly. "We're both focused on our careers for now but are considering starting a family in the future." The words hung in the air like an uninvited guest. I nearly choked on my water but managed to maintain composure as my mother's eyes sparkled with delight at the mention of grandchildren. "Oh, how wonderful. You both would make such great parents." As the conversation flowed around us, talking about work, art shows, and future plans, I felt an unexpected warmth growing between Jasmine and me. She was playing her role perfectly, her responses were thoughtful and engaging. It was as if we were dancing around each other in this intricate choreography of pretense. But beneath that surface-level connection lay an undercurrent of tension that neither of us acknowledged openly. The more we engaged in this charade, the more complicated everything felt. After brunch concluded and we stepped outside into the bustling streets of San Francisco, I turned to Jasmine with a mixture of relief and frustration. "You were amazing in there," I said genuinely. "Thanks," she replied with a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "I didn't realize I was auditioning for a role in your family drama." I laughed lightly but quickly sobered as I realized how true that was. It feels surreal sometimes, like we're living someone else's life. Jasmine sighed and ran a hand through her hair, revealing her vulnerability for just a moment before putting on her composed facade again. "We can keep this up for as long as necessary," she said firmly. As we walked side by side through the city streets filled with life and energy, something shifted within me, a realization that this arrangement was becoming more than just an escape from reality, it was becoming part of who we were together. Later that evening, as we returned home after another long day filled with pretense and unspoken emotions, I found myself reflecting on what this arrangement truly meant for both of us. Jasmine was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone when I plopped down beside her. "What if we just stopped pretending?" I blurted out before I could think better of it. She looked up sharply, surprise etched across her features. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we let go of this whole charade? It's exhausting trying to keep up appearances." Jasmine's expression hardened slightly as she processed my words. "And what would that mean for us? For your family? For my career?" I felt a lump form in my throat as I realized how deeply intertwined our lives had become, even if it started as a mere escape plan. "I don't know," I admitted softly. For a moment, silence enveloped us like a heavy blanket until Jasmine finally spoke again. "Let's just take it one day at a time." That night, as we settled into bed, two women caught between reality and illusion, I couldn't shake off the feeling that whatever path lay ahead would be anything but simple. The weeks rolled on, and the initial thrill of our arrangement began to settle into a routine. Living with Jasmine was like stepping into a beautifully curated gallery, everything in its place, everything polished to perfection. But beneath that surface lay a chaotic world of emotions that neither of us dared to fully explore. I woke up one morning to the sound of rain tapping against the window, the soft rhythm soothing yet melancholic. I stretched lazily, feeling the warmth of the blankets around me, and glanced over at Jasmine, who was already up, her laptop open and papers scattered around her like a scene from a law office. She was deeply engrossed in her work, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Good morning, Mrs. Rivers," I teased, trying to lighten the mood. She looked up briefly, a smile breaking through her seriousness. "Good morning. I'm just reviewing some contracts for a client. You know how it is." I nodded, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for the carefree days when our interactions were filled with laughter and spontaneity rather than work and responsibilities. "How about we take a break today? Go explore the city? It's been ages since we did something fun." Jasmine hesitated, glancing at her screen as if weighing her options. "I really should finish this," she said reluctantly. "Come on, just a few hours. We can grab coffee at that little cafe by the bay," I urged, my excitement bubbling over. Finally, she relented with a sigh. "All right, just for a couple of hours." We bundled up against the chilly air and stepped outside into the bustling streets of San Francisco. The rain had stopped, leaving everything glistening under gray skies. As we walked hand in hand toward the cafe, I felt an electric thrill at our casual intimacy, a stark contrast to the formalities we had maintained during brunch with my family. At the cafe, we found a cozy corner table by the window. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped us like a warm hug as we settled in with our drinks. I watched Jasmine as she took a sip from her mug, her eyes scanning the street outside. There was something beautiful about her focus, it was as if she saw every detail, the raindrops sliding down the glass, the people hurrying by, each lost in their own world. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" I asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence between us. She turned to me, surprise flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this whole arrangement. It started as a way to escape our realities, but now it feels like we're just stuck in this limbo." Jasmine set her mug down gently and leaned back in her chair, contemplating my words. "I suppose it's easy to get lost in it all," she admitted slowly. "But it's not like we can just walk away from it either." "Why not?" I challenged gently. "What if we actually explored what this could be? What if we stopped pretending?" She looked at me intently, and for a moment, I thought I saw something shift in her eyes, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface. Before she could respond, our conversation was interrupted by an enthusiastic group of friends who entered the cafe, laughing and chatting loudly. They spotted us and waved over excitedly. "Lila, Jasmine, join us," one of them called out. I exchanged glances with Jasmine, she raised an eyebrow but smiled nonetheless. We joined them at their table, where laughter filled the air like music. As we mingled with friends and shared stories over coffee and pastries, I felt an unexpected sense of belonging wash over me. But amidst the laughter and camaraderie, I couldn't shake off that lingering tension between Jasmine and me, the unspoken words hovering just out of reach. Later that evening, as we returned home after an exhilarating day filled with laughter and connection, Jasmine seemed quieter than usual. I sensed that something had shifted. During our time with friends, a realization that perhaps this arrangement was no longer just about escape, it was about something deeper. As we settled into our evening routine, Jasmine poring over legal documents while I painted in my studio, I couldn't help but steal glances at her focused expression. She was so dedicated to her work, it fascinated me how she could immerse herself completely in what she did. "Do you ever take breaks?" I asked playfully as I splashed vibrant colors onto my canvas. "Not often enough," she replied without looking up. I put down my brush and walked over to where she sat at the dining table. "You deserve some fun too. How about we have a movie night? Just us." Jasmine finally looked up at me with a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "What do you have in mind?" "Something light. A rom-com maybe. Or an adventure film," I suggested enthusiastically. After a moment's hesitation, she smiled softly. "All right then, let's do it." As we settled onto the couch later that night with popcorn between us and blankets draped over our laps, I felt an electric charge in the air, an anticipation that was both thrilling and terrifying. The movie played on as we laughed together at silly scenes and shared playful banter about characters' choices on screen. But as the credits rolled and silence enveloped us once more, an unspoken tension lingered between us, a need to address what had been brewing beneath our playful facade. "Lila," Jasmine began hesitantly after a long pause. "About earlier, what you said." I held my breath as she searched for words. "I think, maybe there's more to this than either of us expected." My heart raced at her admission, hope flickered within me like a candle fighting against darkness. I mean, she continued slowly, maybe it's time we figure out what this really is, what we really are. In that moment, everything shifted, reality collided with possibility as we sat together on that couch, two women caught between friendship and something more profound than either had anticipated. The morning light streamed through the window, casting a golden hue across the living room. I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety, my heart racing as I remembered Jasmine's words from the night before. There was something brewing between us, something that could change everything. I got out of bed, my mind racing with possibilities. As I made my way to the kitchen, I found Jasmine already up, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. She was sipping her coffee, lost in thought as she stared out at the view of the city. There was a quiet beauty about her in those moments, vulnerable yet strong. "Good morning," I said softly, pouring myself a cup of coffee and joining her at the counter. "Morning," she replied, her voice still tinged with sleep. She turned to me, and for a moment, we just stood there, the air thick with unspoken words. I took a deep breath, deciding to break the silence. "About last night, what do you want this to be?" Jasmine looked thoughtful, her brow furrowing slightly. "I think we need to be honest with each other," she said carefully. "This started as a way to escape our realities, but it feels like it's evolving into something more." My heart soared at her admission. "I feel it too," I confessed. "I didn't expect to develop feelings for you, but here we are." She smiled softly, and in that moment, I felt a rush of warmth flood through me. It was as if we had crossed an invisible line into uncharted territory, a place where vulnerability and honesty could flourish. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk along the waterfront. The sun was shining brightly now, casting shimmering reflections on the water's surface. As we strolled side by side, I felt an exhilarating sense of freedom. We were no longer just two women pretending to be married, we were exploring the possibility of something real. "Do you remember when we first met?" I asked playfully as we walked past street performers and families enjoying their day. "Of course," Jasmine replied with a chuckle. "You spilled paint all over me." I laughed at the memory. "It was such a disaster. But look where we are now." "True," she said thoughtfully. "It's funny how life takes unexpected turns." We reached a small park overlooking the bay and found a bench where we could sit and watch the boats glide by. As we settled in, I turned to Jasmine, my heart pounding with anticipation. "Can I ask you something?" I ventured. "Sure," she replied, looking at me with those piercing eyes that seemed to see right through me. "What do you want from this? From us?" The question hung in the air between us like a delicate thread. Jasmine took a deep breath and looked out at the water for a moment before answering. "I want to explore this connection we have," she said finally. "But I also don't want to rush into anything without knowing how you truly feel." "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But I think there's something special here, something worth pursuing." Her gaze met mine, and in that instant, everything felt clear. We were standing on the precipice of something beautiful and terrifying all at once. As the days passed, our connection deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. We began to share our dreams and fears more openly, conversations that stretched late into the night as we curled up on the couch together or lay in bed talking about everything from our childhoods to our aspirations for the future. One evening, while watching a movie together, a rom-com that had us both laughing, Jasmine leaned closer to me on the couch. The warmth of her body against mine sent shivers down my spine. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to close the distance between us. "Jasmine," I whispered softly, my heart racing as I turned to face her. "Fully, yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Without thinking twice, I leaned in and pressed my lips against hers, a tentative kiss that quickly ignited into something more passionate and consuming. It felt like fireworks exploding inside me as our mouths moved together in perfect harmony. When we finally pulled away, breathless and wide-eyed, reality crashed back in like a wave washing over us. "What just happened?" Jasmine asked, her eyes searching mine for answers. I think we just crossed another line," I said breathlessly. Her smile was radiant as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "And it feels amazing." In that moment, everything shifted again. Our relationship had transformed from mere pretense into something real and profound, a bond forged through laughter, vulnerability, and now passion. As days turned into weeks filled with shared moments of intimacy, cooking dinner together while dancing in the kitchen or cuddling on lazy Sunday mornings, I found myself falling deeper for Jasmine than I ever thought possible. Each day brought new discoveries about each other, her quirky habits that made me laugh and her quiet moments of reflection that revealed layers of depth within her soul. But amidst this blossoming romance lay an undercurrent of uncertainty. Both of us were aware that our initial arrangement had been built on deception, even if it had evolved into something genuine. The weight of that truth loomed over us like an uninvited guest at our table. One evening after dinner, while sitting on our balcony overlooking the city lights twinkling below us like stars fallen to earth, Jasmine turned to me with an expression of seriousness etched across her features. "Lila," she began hesitantly, "we need to talk about what happens next." My heart sank slightly. I knew this conversation was coming but wasn't sure how to navigate it without jeopardizing what we had built together. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. "I love what we have now," she said slowly. "But we need to figure out how to move forward without losing sight of who we are, without losing ourselves in this." Her words resonated deeply within me, they echoed my own fears and desires perfectly. "You're right," I agreed softly. "We need to be honest about everything, the past and what lies ahead." As we sat together under the stars that night, two women caught between love and uncertainty, I realized that whatever path lay ahead would require courage from both of us, a willingness to embrace vulnerability while navigating this new chapter together. The days that followed our heartfelt conversation were a whirlwind of emotions. Jasmine and I had crossed a threshold that felt both exhilarating and daunting. We were no longer just two women pretending to be married, we were navigating the complexities of a real relationship, one filled with the promise of love but also the weight of our past decisions. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of rain pattering against the window. The world outside was muted, the gray skies casting a cozy ambiance over our apartment. I turned to see Jasmine still asleep beside me, her features softened in slumber. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a rush of affection for her. It was moments like this that made everything feel right. After a while, I decided to let her sleep a little longer while I brewed some coffee and prepared breakfast. The scent of freshly ground coffee filled the air as I whisked together eggs and chopped vegetables for an omelet. I hummed softly to myself, enjoying the quiet morning. Just as I finished plating our breakfast, Jasmine appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes and looking adorably disheveled. "What's that amazing smell?" she asked, her voice still thick with sleep. "Breakfast. I thought I'd treat you," I replied with a grin. Her eyes lit up as she walked over to the table. "You're spoiling me," she said playfully, taking a seat. "I aim to please," I said, serving her a generous portion. We chatted over breakfast, sharing stories and laughter as we always did. But beneath the surface of our light-hearted banter was an undercurrent of tension, an awareness that we needed to confront the reality of our situation. After breakfast, we decided to take advantage of the rainy day by curling up on the couch with blankets and a movie. As we settled in, I could feel Jasmine's body tense beside me. It was as if she was bracing herself for something. "Lila," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "We need to talk about our families." The mention of our families sent a jolt through me. My parents had been eager to hear more about our marriage, and Jasmine's family had their own expectations as well. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too," I admitted. "We can't keep this up forever," she continued, her voice steady despite the gravity of her words. "Eventually, they'll want to meet us together, like really meet us." I nodded slowly, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I know. And what do we tell them? That this was all just a ruse?" Jasmine sighed deeply, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "I don't want to lie anymore. But I also don't want to hurt them. What if we told them the truth?" I suggested hesitantly. "That we started this as an escape but ended up finding something real." She looked at me thoughtfully, weighing my words. "That could work, but it might be complicated." "Complicated is better than lying," I replied firmly. "We owe it to ourselves, and to them, to be honest." Jasmine took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Okay, let's do it together." The decision felt monumental. It was as if we were stepping into uncharted territory hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Later that week, we arranged dinner with my parents at their favorite restaurant, a cozy Italian place with dim lighting and an inviting atmosphere. As we walked in together, my heart raced with anticipation and dread. My parents were already seated at a corner table, their faces lighting up when they saw us approach. "Lila, Jasmine, so good to see you both," my mother exclaimed, standing up to give us each a hug. "Thanks for meeting us," Jasmine said politely as we took our seats. As we settled in and ordered our meals, my parents peppered us with questions about our lives, how work was going for both of us and what plans we had for the future. It felt like any other dinner until my mother leaned forward with an expectant smile. "So when are you two planning on having kids?" she asked brightly. My stomach dropped at her question. It felt like a spotlight shining directly on us. Jasmine shot me a quick glance before turning back to my mother with an expression that was both composed and concerned. "Actually," Jasmine began carefully, "there's something important we need to talk about." My heart raced as I prepared for what was about to unfold. This was it, the moment where everything could change. "We didn't get married for the reasons you think," Jasmine continued, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "It started as an arrangement between us, an escape from family expectations." My parents exchanged confused glances while I held my breath, waiting for their reactions. "But over time," Jasmine added quickly, "we found something real between us, a connection that neither of us expected." My mother's expression shifted from confusion to concern as she processed Jasmine's words. "So, you're saying this was all fake?" I felt compelled to jump in. Before things spiraled further out of control. "No, not fake. It started that way but turned into something genuine." My voice trembled slightly as I spoke. My father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms thoughtfully. "And you're happy, really happy?" he asked cautiously. "Yes," Jasmine replied firmly, looking directly at them with sincerity in her eyes. "We are happy together." After what felt like an eternity of silence filled with uncertainty and unspoken emotions, my mother finally spoke again, her voice softer now. "We just want what's best for you both." "I know," I said gently, reaching across the table to take Jasmine's hand in mine, a simple gesture that felt monumental in that moment. As dinner progressed, my parents began to ask more questions, not just about our relationship but about who we were becoming together. It felt liberating to share our truth openly without hiding behind pretense or fear. By the end of the evening, there was an undeniable shift in our dynamic, a sense of acceptance blossoming between us all as my parents began to understand that love could take many forms. As we left the restaurant hand in hand under the soft glow of streetlights illuminating San Francisco's streets, I felt lighter than air, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "Thank you for doing that with me," Jasmine said softly as we walked along the waterfront where waves lapped gently against the shore. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied sincerely. In that moment under the stars reflecting on the water's surface, everything felt possible again, our future stretching out before us like an open canvas waiting for new colors and strokes. The morning after our dinner with my parents, I woke up feeling a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. The truth had been laid bare, and while it felt liberating, I couldn't shake off the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Jasmine was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful and serene. I took a moment to admire her, the way the morning light danced across her features, highlighting the gentle curve of her lips and the soft lines of her jaw. As I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, I felt a sense of determination wash over me. We had taken a significant step forward, and now it was time to embrace whatever came next. I quietly made my way to the kitchen to brew some coffee and prepare breakfast. The familiar routine felt comforting amidst the whirlwind of emotion swirling in my mind. When Jasmine finally stirred awake, she joined me in the kitchen, rubbing her eyes and yawning. "What's that smell?" she asked, a sleepy smile spreading across her face. "Coffee and breakfast," I replied, pouring her a steaming cup. "I thought we could celebrate our little breakthrough." She took a sip and sighed contentedly. "You always know how to make mornings better." We enjoyed breakfast together, the atmosphere light and filled with laughter as we recounted funny moments from our dinner with my parents. But beneath the surface, there was an unspoken tension, an awareness that we were standing on the precipice of something significant. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk along the waterfront. The sun was shining brightly now, casting a warm glow over everything. As we strolled hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It was as if all the pieces were finally falling into place. "Do you think your parents will be okay with everything?" Jasmine asked, glancing at me with concern. "I hope so," I replied honestly. "They love me, and I think they want what's best for me. They just need time to adjust." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "And what about your friends? Have you thought about telling them?" I hesitated for a moment. My friends had always been supportive of my choices, but this felt different. "I think I should tell them," I said finally. "They deserve to know who I really am." As we continued walking, we talked about what our lives might look like moving forward, how we would navigate our relationship in a world that often didn't understand it. The more we discussed it, the more excited I became about the possibilities. Later that week, I invited my closest friends over for dinner, a small gathering where I could share our truth in a comfortable setting. As the evening approached, I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation bubbling inside me. When my friends arrived, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. We shared stories and laughter over appetizers before settling down for dinner. As we enjoyed a delicious meal together, I could feel the moment approaching when I would reveal our news. After dessert, I took a deep breath and looked around at the faces of my friends, each one filled with love and support. "I have something important to share with you all," I began, my voice steady despite the fluttering in my stomach. Jasmine sat beside me, her hand resting on mine as she offered silent encouragement. "We've been keeping something from you," I continued. "Jasmine and I are married, but it's not what you think." Confusion flickered across their faces as they exchanged glances. "It started as an arrangement, a way for both of us to escape family expectations," I explained quickly. "But over time, we found something real between us." Silence enveloped the room for a moment as my friends processed my words. Then one of them spoke up, Maya, always the most outspoken among us. "Wait, so you're saying you're actually in love?" she asked incredulously. "Yes," Jasmine chimed in confidently. "We are genuinely happy together." A wave of understanding washed over my friends' faces as they began to grasp the depth of our connection. "I'm so proud of you both for being honest," Maya said with a bright smile. That takes courage. One by one, my friends expressed their support, asking questions about how we met and what our plans were for the future. It felt liberating to share our truth openly without fear or judgment. As the evening wore on and laughter filled our apartment once more, it became clear that this was just another step in our journey together, a journey that was still unfolding before us. In the days that followed, Jasmine and I continued to explore our relationship with newfound openness. We spent weekends hiking through lush trails or visiting art galleries where we would discuss everything from color theory to life's deeper meanings. But amidst all this joy lay an undercurrent of reality. We knew we had yet to face Jasmine's family, a conversation that loomed on the horizon like an approaching storm cloud. One evening after dinner, while curled up on the couch together, Jasmine turned to me with a serious expression on her face. "I've been thinking about how to tell my family," she said quietly. My heart raced at her words. This was uncharted territory for both of us. "How do you feel about it?" I asked gently. "I'm nervous," she admitted honestly. "They have certain expectations for me, especially regarding marriage." I reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." She smiled softly at my words before taking a deep breath as if steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Okay then, let's do this." The next weekend, Jasmine arranged a dinner at her family's home, a cozy suburban house filled with warmth and laughter where she had grown up. As we drove there together, my stomach churned with nerves. This was going to be one of the most important conversations of our lives. When we arrived, Jasmine's parents greeted us warmly as they always did, her mother enveloping us both in hugs while her father smiled broadly at his daughter's companion. Over dinner, filled with delicious homemade dishes, I could feel tension building beneath the surface as Jasmine prepared to broach the subject that weighed heavily on both our hearts. Finally, after dessert had been served and small talk filled the air like cotton candy fluffiness around us, Jasmine cleared her throat and looked directly at her parents. "Mom, Dad, there's something important we need to talk about," she began hesitantly. Her parents exchanged curious glances as they leaned forward in their seats, eager yet apprehensive. "We've been married," Jasmine continued slowly but firmly. "But it started as an arrangement, an escape from expectations, and turned into something real between us." The silence that followed felt deafening. Every eye in the room widened in surprise as they processed her words. "What do you mean by arrangement?" her father asked cautiously. "We were trying to navigate our own lives while meeting family expectations," I interjected gently but confidently. "But what blossomed between us is genuine love." Jasmine's mother looked between us with tears forming in her eyes, a mixture of confusion and concern evident on her face. "You're both serious about this?" "Yes," Jasmine replied firmly as she reached for my hand across the table, a gesture filled with strength and reassurance. As they absorbed this revelation, their expressions shifting from shock to contemplation, I held my breath waiting for their response. After what felt like an eternity filled with uncertainty hanging thickly in the air like fog rolling off San Francisco Bay, came Jasmine's mother's voice again, soft yet resolute. "If you're happy, then that's what matters most." Tears brimmed in my eyes at those words. Relief washed over me like waves crashing against rocks along the shore, a beautiful release from tension built up over time. Jasmine squeezed my hand tightly under the table as smiles broke out around us, her father nodding slowly while his mother wiped away tears of joy mixed with acceptance. As dinner continued amidst laughter and heartfelt conversations about love, the future, the importance of being true to oneself, I realized how far we had come together since that fateful night when everything began unfolding between us like petals blooming under sunlight. With each passing moment spent surrounded by warmth from family, the acceptance blossoming around us, I knew deep down that whatever challenges lay ahead would only serve to strengthen our bond further still, two women navigating life together hand in hand ready for whatever adventures awaited us next.